Hello everyone, welcome to gaming. I'm Nick on the side of the comments, of course, Justin. This will be an interesting video. This is going to be a bit of a different video. Don't click off, don't just yet. Uh, we are going to do something a little bit different today, and that is going to be more of an observation video than a straight up news video. There will be news, don't get me wrong in this, but it's going to be more focused on what this news kind of implies rather than the news itself, if you're following what I'm getting at here. The news that I'm strictly going to be covering today, just in terms of genre, theme, pick your poison.
Pick your
Well, let's
poison,
say
Jay.
franchise. There's the proper word. Because I know there's going to be some guy in the comments who goes, technically it does different things. And yes, you're right. Anyways, this is going to be the Pokemon debacle, the Star Rail debacle, and the Xbox debacle. These are, on their own, pretty individual things, you know? You could arguably sitting here saying, why the heck is Star Rail even on here? And yeah, we'll get to that, we'll get to that. But it's more the fact that recently all of these things have kind of come out in these respective games, and honestly, I could probably go on and find more games, but I feel like this is enough to make a point here. That just feels like everyone suddenly got very greedy all of a sudden. More than usual, anyway. You know, all this is either coming to light or just done so poorly, and you're just sitting there going, why does it feel like the games industry is suddenly imploding in greed?
Why
all
are
of a
we
sudden?
still here again?
Yeah, it's like, why is the industry suddenly imploding in greed all of a sudden? Like, yeah, sure, there's greed. EA is currently always does that. But I guess now that they've been bought up by a private equity firm, everyone just feels the desire to fill the void, I guess. So yeah, let's just kind of go down the list of my things. Let's start with Pokemon ZA, which I led off the show with. If you're not aware, ZA is the latest Pokemon game to come off the assembly line that is the Pokemon games in general. It is a Legends game, so it's technically not a mainline game. However, it's been received not great. Not great.
Amazingly.
Not amazingly, no. Then again, that depends on who you ask, and we'll get into that a bit. But to make a long story short, most people are divided. Well, I should say the community is, not the community, the reviews are divided. You have the professional reviews, which I dare not go anywhere below, or they dare not go anywhere below like a 6 or a 7. And then you've got the actual, like, player score, which is just down in the drain. So what's causing the difference? Well, it's caused by the general reception to ZA. This is meant to be a game where you're supposed to be in a city. I think it's Unova, though I might be wrong. No, it's a region. It's been a while. It's the one from Black and White. And they're bringing that region back. It's going to be a story based in that city. And, you know, it's going to be more of a city feel, right? You're going to primarily be within the city bounds. So you think, okay, cool. We got an interesting, like, city concept here. Problem is, graphically wise, it's executed poorly, to say the least. Now, in full disclosure, this is one game I have not played. I, for financial reasons, have not bought it yet, but that's completely unrelated.
That's unrelated. Don't worry about it.
Well, you make that sound conspiratorial. It generally isn't, though, so, you know, don't worry about it. However, when it comes to the actual reception, it speaks for itself, because, frankly, the issues don't lie so much in the gameplay, it's in the graphics. This is meant to be a city, yet it feels very hollow, very flat. In fact, I've heard people refer to it as a PlayStation 2 era-like game. Which, you know, you might have some people sitting there saying, you know, this is a Switch game, they're not known for the highest graphics, yada yada yada. Granted, this is a game that comes out on the Switch 2 as well. In fact, I might be wrong, I think there is also a Switch 2 version, or just Switch 2 based version. Though, let me check on that to be sure. This one I'm not too sure about, so let me just make sure I'm not misquoting here. Switch 2. This is where we do some live action review, or live action lookups. There we go. No, by the looks of this, this is a PS2, or PS2. This is a Switch 2 exclusive game. Let me just check that again.
By the rings.
Just by the rings? What in the world are you on about?
Yes.
You know, there are days I wonder why we keep him around, folks.
See, you always say random madness, whatever madness applicable.
Yeah, I said applicable.
Yeah.
But anyways, it does look like this is only more or less a... Well, no, it does look like there's a Switch one. No, from what I can tell, there is possibly a Switch 1 version, but it looks like it's mostly a Switch 2 thing. Regardless, the graphics are flat, you know, they look very, just like I said, PS2 like everyone's saying here. Which isn't great, considering this is supposed to be, you know, the big game that is Pokemon. So what's so bad about that? You know, like I said, what's the big deal? Well, the fact came out recently that supposedly, combined with a supposed data breach from Game Freak, who made the Pokemon games, as well as what we're getting from investors, it turns out the Pokemon games actually don't have a lot of money sunk into them, despite pretty much being a license to print money. In fact, according to an article that we have here, told you there was going to be news somewhere, by Games Radar, Pokemon ZA only needs to sell 200,000 units to break even, former Nintendo marketing lead estimates. So, yeah. It is interesting that only something that you'd think would be having a lot of money invested into it only needs to sell like 20 million units, or 200,000 units, which you might think, that's a lot of units. Not really. Like, let's do the math, right? Let's say all the games are priced at like, what, 80 bucks nowadays? So, let's say 80 USD, let's say 90 or something after tax. I'm just going off Canadian tax, so you have 13%. Yes, it is shite, but that's beside the point. And times it up by like 200,000. So, let's just do that ourselves.
Yes.
Get you a number so you don't have to do the math. See, this is me being nice. Let's just say 90 bucks.
Helpful to you today.
Just for the sake of ease, so you guys don't have to do back and napkin math. 90 bucks, which again is not the exact number. We're not factoring in change here. But let's just say 90 bucks flat is times 200,000 is only 18 million. So that means, according to this back of the napkin math, and again, this is just on Canadian numbers, the game only needs to make around 18 million to break even. Which might sound like a lot to guys like you and me who probably have never seen a solid million in their life, or at the very least multiple millions.
But
in a games industry where, yeah, to a company that prints money off of this franchise, I mean, again, there are games in this industry that, granted, game production numbers rarely get disclosed, but those numbers that we do get disclosed sometimes are bigger than movie budgets. Like, we're talking a billion in some cases. And, or at the very least, hundreds of millions, you know? So it just feels like they're underinvesting on something that is a license to print money. So all this talk of them basically being lambasted for bad graphics, it just makes you wonder if it almost feels like a cash grab on Nintendo's part and
Yes.
Game Freak's part. This doesn't help by the fact that Game Freak recently released a trailer for another game they're developing that has nothing to do with Pokemon, that has a massive jump in graphics and quality. Granted, that is not for the Switch or anything. I think it's for mainline consoles. But the fact of the matter is, this is what they can do, yet this is what they're giving for Pokemon. The cash cow. I don't know, call it me being, I don't know, a bit suspicious, but it just feels like they're being a bit cheap here.
They're trying to get money to get money.
Yeah. Granted, Nintendo has always had a policy of quality over quantity, so to speak. So, they're always not ones to invest in Major League, but still. This certainly doesn't help with the fact that according to recent leaks from Game Freak, again, these are supposed leaks, Game Freak hasn't confirmed them one way or the other, that revealed the budget, albeit in yen, for the previous games in the Pokemon series, this actually would match, considering Pokemon Sword and Shield is only about 2.498 billion yen. Yen is weird because it's inflated to hell and back. Which only works out to about $16.4 million for Sword and Shield. Legends Arceus got even less than that at 2.175 billion yen, which again only translates to 14.4 million, with Scarlet and Violet supposedly being the most expensive one of the numbers we have, with that going about 3.298 billion yen, which is $21.8 million. Which again, sounds like a lot of money because, yeah, on paper it is. But in the games industry, it's actually relatively cheap. Like I said, we're dealing with games that in some cases cost hundreds of millions to make.
Yes, a lot of money sometimes.
So, you know, when you're only spending like a quarter of that, and again, that would even be able to be explained away with, you know, if this were an indie company, it's a new game, that's a lot of money. But this is Pokemon. And yeah, Game Freak is technically an independent, but they have close ties to Nintendo because they always do. They're the ones who always make the Pokemon games. So you can't tell me that they're an indie studio. They
No.
just aren't.
No, they're. I think they're beyond indie.
Yeah. I mean, even this article points out that 3 of Treyarch's Call of Duty Black Ops games cost between 450 and 700 million to make.
Yeah, I think it's a little expensive, maybe.
And Ghost of Yotai, which is the most recent thing to come out of Ghost of Tsushima,
Yeah.
cost 60 million to make.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
might seem like a
Big
amount of money, and
it might not seem like a pretty penny, but sometimes that's the thing with a lot of games nowadays. They cost a ridiculous amount, and a lot of the time when it comes to games, it's actually you're somewhat kind of in the negatives unless it's a big banger hit.
it depends. I
It
mean,
depends.
again, when it comes to actual production values and things, that usually doesn't get disclosed unless there's a court case, or in this case,
Yes.
from Game Freak, a data breach. However, what we do know is that most games, while they do make money, cost a lot of money to make. Like, I'm not even going to think about what The Outer Worlds has cost to produce, the second one that is. Which, speaking on The Outer Worlds, let's transition over to that, considering we've taken 11 minutes just to look at Pokemon. Ugh. Well, there's only 3 things on the list today, so I don't think
That's
it's
not
too bad. Not so bad. So anyways, on the topic of The Outer Worlds, and this is more to do with Xbox in general than per se The Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds as a studio, or should I say Obsidian, has done nothing wrong.
No.
It's more Xbox who controls them that has done a lot of things wrong. We've already covered on this channel how Xbox has raised the price of Game Pass, and it's a massive inflation, and how we're having to pay double in some cases.
Increasing the prices of anything that they have right now that is of major note that customers would want.
Well, in fairness, it's mostly the Game Pass thing.
It's
though
mostly
there
the
are,
Game Passes.
Don't miss the quote here. Excuse me. However, the fact is that Xbox has certainly been trying to push the dial. That much you are right on. In fact, this does bring us back to The Outer Worlds, which, according to an article by IGN, The Outer Worlds was actually originally set to market at $80 price point. $80 US, mind you. If you're in Canada, I think it's already $80. But that was the original plan. But they scaled that back, putting it to $70 and saying that none of their holiday games, including The Outer Worlds, would be $70. But they did try that at one point, early on. And now, according to a recent article, we might actually have a reason for that. Why are they determined to suddenly jack the prices? Well, according to an article by TechSpot, it actually has to do with Microsoft. Surprise, surprise. Microsoft, specifically, so the title says, Microsoft wants Xbox to hit a 30% margins, and that explains the price hikes and layoffs.
Yes.
This is because of the fact the games industry itself averages between 17 and 22%, in terms of profit margins. So, in other words, that means that, when you make, for those who don't understand economics, let me just break it down for you really simply. When a person says we're making a profit margin, that basically means, okay, after we factor everything in, we're making about 30% of that in profit back, or 17%, or 22%. So let's say you sell something for $100 and you get a 22% profit. Well, cool. That means you got $22 on top of the 100. Again, that's very simplified, but it does a good way to explain profit margins. So anyways, to make a long story short, despite the games industry being profitable, Microsoft still wants more. Because, like I said, as the article points out, the game industry only averages between 17 and 22% profit margins. Yet, Microsoft, for one reason or another, wants 30. And again, the article goes into the fact that Microsoft has cut 270,000 jobs since 2022, and the Xbox division was hit extremely hard on that. Then it brings up the things we've talked about before, between the Game Pass rises and the console prices and aggressive cost cutting and yada yada yada. Well, according to an anonymous Bloomberg source, Microsoft began demanding 30% profit margins across all divisions in 2023. This target far exceeds the game industry's average. The aggressive demands forced Xbox division to implement drastic policy changes in an attempt to meet them. And again, the article goes on kind of going into that. But again, it feels really weird, you know? All of this just seems to be coming at around the same time, which is kind of where the crux of this article, or this whole, not article, this whole discussion comes in, yeah? Like, it feels all of this is just hitting us at once. Granted, this is more from 2023, but we're starting to feel it now in 2025. So I guess it took them 2 years to reinvent the wheel.
A little.
But it just feels like all of this is happening at once, yeah? And again, we could do a individual piece on all of these. Like I said, I could sit here and talk for an hour about Pokemon ZA. Most of this video was. I could sit here and talk about, you know, the whole business 22% or 30% price hike, which I could. Or I could sit here and talk about the next thing on my list, which is Star Rail. Now, you might sit there and think, wait a minute, Nick. Okay, cool. We get the fact that Xbox is being greedy more than usual. We get the fact that Pokemon ZA, Pokemon in general, Nintendo in general, if you want to generalize, is being more greedy than usual. But then again, remember, this is the same company that charges us for the same game twice in 2 different versions. I just mentioned Scarlet and Violet as one of the games, and Sword and Shield. So they make us buy their game twice. It's true. But you gotta remember that these games are still successes, and they could be way more successful. Yet it feels like all of a sudden we're getting all this talk about how the companies are just being very greedy. And all of it seems to be coming to the surface at once. Which, again, segues me back to Star Rail. Which, I know, is a gacha game. It's Hoyo, for pity's sake. They're known for being greedy at times. I mean, such is the nature of the business, right? But again, this one feels like the others, just excessively greedy, needlessly so, arguably. Now, if you're not too familiar, there's a character that came out recently, or will come out recently, soon, yeah, that's probably better to say, that will come out soon called Cyrene. To save you a lot of backdrop, this character is basically based on another character from another of Hoyo's very popular games, Honkai Impact 3rd. This character, Eliza in that game, has a lot of fanfare. Again, I'll spare you the fluff and just say it does, trust me. So when they tried to implement a version of her into Star Rail, everyone expected, you know, gangbusters. Everyone was going to pull for her. It's going to be a massive profit margin for Hoyo. It's going to be great. Instead, what they do, they make the character who's a well-known fan favorite a terrible, terrible kit. So, in other words, she plays really, really bad where she doesn't have to. And they sell a fix in the form of basically having to pull for her 3 times. So, for those who aren't aware of how the game works, there's an Eidolon system or a Starve system. I don't remember what it's called, actually. I think it's Eidolons. Where basically every time you pull for a character, you get a certain buff unlocked on their tree. A permanent buff, you could say. First time gets you the character, second time unlocks E1, third time E2, yada yada, you get it. So what do they do to fix the problem with Cyrene? Well, her main problem is the fact that her ability takes a stupid long time to be effective. And considering this is a turn-based game akin to, say, the old Final Fantasies, that ain't good considering a lot of the endgame modes actually have to do with being able to beat the enemies really fast. So yes. A character that is designed to work stupid slow is pretty much a death sentence for endgame content. I mean, it takes 3 turns just for her thing to charge once, which, again, you might not be too familiar with what that is, but just take my word for it, it's a long time. So what do? Well, they sell the fix behind E2ing her, which cuts her timer in half the first time you go into battle, I think. Which, yeah, that's just needlessly greedy. And despite the fact that everyone has pretty much lambasted this kit, to the point where even the Chinese players brought it up, even in the live stream that had to do with this character, what happened to them? Well, according to the story, they got muted. So it's really bad when even the players are calling out the greed here and their response is to simply get muted.
Yeah, it's not so great.
Yeah. Especially when Hoyo does have a history of listening to the CM players more in the global community. I mean, it makes sense. They are a Chinese company. But again, even they got muted.
It goes and tells you that something's not right.
Yeah, and it gets so much better. Because on top of all this debacle with her kit, which is already bad enough, in the live stream that revealed her recently, they revealed a $200 weapon skin for her that gives her special animations and, like, just it changes her animation set effectively. Which, yeah, on top of the fact that they're already asking you to C2 her just to make, or E2 her just to make her viable, it feels needlessly greedy on top of it. Like, do they expect this to be profitable? Like, who is making the business decisions here? Again, this feels needless. Like the last time we had a major character, at least to my knowledge, that went gangbusters was Firefly back in Pentacoli. She had a great kit. She worked really well, and her story was really great. Everyone pulled for her to the point that, if I'm remembering correctly, it literally caused issues. I think it caused crashes because of how many people were pulling for her. It was very profitable for Hoyo that day. Well, that extended period of time. And yet, when they have the chance to do it again with Cyrene, which has even more fanfare, like I said, she's an entire previous game behind her. Technically, they're two different characters, but they're based off the same character. They go the complete opposite direction and just try to milk it for all it's worth, and, well, it's causing just way more bad press than it needs to. And I haven't even talked about the fact that her kit is technically only really character specific, so it only really works the best on very specific characters from a certain region, which is nearing its end, and
It's not so great.
you know, there's not so great considering Hoyo, at least in Star Rail, doesn't do much of the time where they introduce characters from previous regions. You know, once you move on from a region, they generally don't introduce more characters from that region again. It's not like something like Genshin or hell, even Zenless, where because everything takes place on the same planet in the case of Genshin, or city in the case of, you know, Zenless, they can easily use that as an excuse to introduce new characters from previous areas because, you know, you may not have just run into them yet. But again, because we're moving from planet to planet to planet here, narratively wise, there's not much of a reason or even excuse to go back to previous planets once everything is said and done in the case of Star Rail. So locking her kit behind planet-specific characters basically means she's built to be useless once new characters get released. Why that is because naturally they'll be stronger than the old characters, and, well, she can't work with them because, again, they're region locked effectively. So, I don't know. Put all of this together, and it just feels like there's a bunch of needless greed going on in the games industry that just doesn't need to be there, between Pokemon being a bit cheaper than they ever should be with the Pokemon games, which, as we've covered in the episode, is a license to print money, to Xbox being forced to hike up all their prices because of Microsoft's unreasonable, let's be honest, profit margins. Yep. Because here's another fun fact about profit margins. They are arbitrary.
They are.
This is one thing
they're just rough numbers.
Yeah, no, honestly, like, the first thing you'll ever get told if you look into profit margins in a business class, which I actually have a business management degree, fun fact, is that profit margins are arbitrary. The amount of money you make is purely whatever the investors or board or whoever's making the decisions on pricing and profits is interested in, you know? You could have 10% profit margins and still be making, 10% of your price back, which is still good. Which, as we've covered in the article, the gaming industry generally averages between 70 to 22% profit margin, or 17 and 22% profit margins, which means they're making back anywhere from 17 to 22% of their costs on a game. On top of breaking even. So, yeah, it's not that the games industry isn't profitable. It's definitely profitable. It's just it's not profitable enough for Microsoft, who is now demanding 30% for reasons. Again, like I said, it's arbitrary. They don't need 30%. Something tells me Microsoft ain't strapped for cash. I mean, you're probably listening to this on a Microsoft device.
I think Microsoft has money. I think they just want more money.
Yeah. And again, then we have the whole issue with Star Rail. And that is just, yeah, again, you could say it's just a gacha, and Hoyo is a gacha game producer, and they're just being greedy here. But again, like everything else we've covered today, they didn't have to be this greedy. Sure, you want to make your money back. Sure, you want to maybe milk an old character. That's understandable. Questionable, but understandable, I suppose. But did you have to do it this bad? Like, make a problem just to sell a solution on top of a literal $200 skin?
Yes.
That is not me being hyperbole. It is literally $200.
Yes, apparently, yes.
Which doesn't even do anything, because in this game, specifically, weapon skins, or weapons in general, don't do anything, because much like in Zenless and in Star Rail, unlike in Genshin, I should say, everyone just uses their signature weapon. Like, no one actually uses a different weapon like you could in Genshin, where everyone can just hot swap a weapon provided it's in their same ballpark. Like, so long as they wield a sword, they can wield anyone else's sword. And they maybe have special animations in the case of Arlecchino if you use their sword, or scythe in this case. So it doesn't really do anything beyond animation changes, which, again, weapons have never really been a hot selling point in this anyway, so I don't know. It all just feels needlessly greedy. So yeah, that's kind of the show we have today. Again, bunch of news articles kind of rolled into one. Like I said, maybe borrowing Star Rail, like you could argue. I could make a big episode on any of these, but I just thought I'd bring it all up as a singular video, you know? This is more of an observation, like I said at the beginning of the episode, than an actual news video. Though there is news here, as I've also said.
There is.
All the articles will be linked down in the description below, so if you want to dig into any of these particular points further, maybe you're a, Hoyo fan, maybe you're a Microsoft fan, which in this case, I'm so sorry for you at the moment. Maybe. What are you doing?
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's depressing right now. It's depressing to be a Microsoft fan right now.
I think he even broke himself, ladies and gentlemen.
I am a
Anyways,
little
so... And again... There's the Pokemon thing, which, again, maybe you're a Pokemon fan. Hell, in this day and age, I'd be surprised if you aren't.
Yeah.
But,
No
I mean,
matter
I can't
what.
complain.
Even if the games don't succeed moving forward, no matter what, Pokemon's gonna forever live.
Yeah, it's going to forever live. I mean, again, I can't complain about being a Pokemon fan. I have a Van Gogh version of a Pikachu portrait. I am not kidding.
He does.
I'm not kidding.
I was there.
He has seen it.
I've seen it.
But again, it just feels weird that this game, this franchise, prints money, and yet they're basically working off indie budgets, effectively. Or at the very least, they're treating themselves like they are, which doesn't make sense. This is Game Freak, for pity's sake. Maybe I'll link the trailer for that new game in the description, just so you get what I'm talking about. But again, all that will be linked in the description below if you want to go into it. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Whew, good God, what time are we at? We're at 26. All right, then.
Yes. 27.
Not as great as I thought it would be, but whatever. Have a good one. Have a good week, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.